things have turned dark in the career of the Montreal Canadiens' former third overall pick in Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Somebody that was looked at as the future for Montreal would only play a couple of seasons with them, and the Canes would want him so much they would offer sheet him and steal him away. And the Hurricanes, in his first year in being there, signed him to a massive 7-year, $38 million deal to keep him a core part of the Hurricanes for a long time. But now, just a couple of years later, Kotkaniemi's play has completely plummeted, and now there is talk of not just a trade, but a potential Kotkaniemi buyout? We went from third overall pick to buyout at 23 years old. What the heck just happened? Well, today we're going to be documenting the rise and the fall of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, what's gone wrong in his career of Carolina, and what could be coming next. So make sure you watch till the end for all of the trade rumors and hit that subscribe button if you're new for all the hockey content all throughout the playoffs and the rest of the offseason. So much stuff coming out to you guys that you won't want to be missing. Now we're going to talk about Jesperi Kotkaniemi in a second, but I wanted to talk to you guys about my Game 7 picks on Sleeper Fantasy. Because Game 7 is here, I just want to show what I'm picking for tonight. First, I got Elias Pettersson, less than 0.5 goals. I mean, this is automatic. Even if Pettersson gets a bunch of points, they'd all be assists because this guy cannot shoot right now. I also got Ian Cole more than 2.5 blocks, even though he's blocked some pucks into his own net. He's also been pretty reliable in that aspect. And then I got Leon Draisaitl, more than 0.5 assists today. He's also been pretty automatic at that. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to count the Canucks out completely because I still think they're going to be the winners in the end like I predicted, but we'll have to wait and see. This Game 7 is going to be nuts, but if you want to predict different players and what they could play, what they could do in this Game 7, go in the description, sign up there with Sleeper Fantasy, and use promo code GRAB, and you'll get up to a $100 deposit match. This is a great time of the NHL, NBA playoffs get started, and Sleeper Fantasy, every time you guys sign up, it helps the channel a ton. So use promo code GRAB, and thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to Sleeper for sponsoring today's video. Now let's start to talk about the former third overall pick in Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and I just start to feel bad for this guy because it feels like no matter what happens, he is always in the news, man. Being a third overall pick by Montreal, especially as someone that was looked at as more of an 8 to 12 pick in the 2018 draft, was already a big surprise for his career and already raised the expectations probably higher than they should have been. But then you see what he was able to do in his first year with the Habs, and as a rookie, he was really good. In 79 games, he had 11 goals, 23 assists for 34 points, and I was extremely impressed with what he was able to do. It started to feel like he was proving some of those doubters wrong and that he was worthy of being that third overall pick. The question was, how much more was he going to push? But for a rookie coming into the NHL, coming to North America, he was about as good as you could have asked. But then his sophomore season would come and the slumps were pretty massive. He would get 8 points in 36 games, and in February would get sent down to the Laval Rocket for a little bit of a refresh. But Jesperi Kotkaniemi would continue to stagnate, going from 6 goals in 2020 to 5 in 2021. And even though he had a decent playoffs, it really wasn't anything remarkable. And for Kotkaniemi, just continued to be an okay center that for Montreal wasn't really seeing much progress. And then we go into August 2021, where basically for revenge for the Habs offer sheeting Sebastian, the Canes came in and offer sheeted Jesperi Kotkaniemi from right under their feet. And it actually ended up working, as the Carolina Hurricanes would sign the RFA, and just a few months later would sign him to that mega 7-year contract. Whether it was for better or worse, the Carolina Hurricanes stole Kotkaniemi. But initially, results were middling. In his first season with Carolina, he'd get 29 points in 66 games. Definitely an upgrade, but his playoffs would have 0 goals, 2 assists for 14 points. Obviously, Kotkaniemi was still a project, and for a Hurricanes team that was really trying to get better, it was a little bit of a mismatch, with Kotkaniemi needing more time and patience, and thankfully in his next season, those results would follow. And Kotkaniemi genuinely was a pretty great player for the Canes in 2023, especially in that second half, where he got 27 points in his last 35 games. It seemed like he was starting to finally turn a page in a corner for Carolina and be the all-around player they acquired and wanted him to be. And his playoffs too, even though it wasn't amazing, it would be a little bit of an upgrade over the year before, 7 points in 15 games now, so you can see the improvement he was starting to make. But now we move on to this season. After making steady improvement for years, and last year really starting to become a true piece of Carolina's system, this year just basically crumbled and destroyed all of that. In 79 games, Kotkaniemi totaled 12 goals, 15 assists for 27 points, and in the entire playoffs, he only played 11 games and got 0 goals, 1 assist for 1 point. Brutal. But you just look at the career points per game. Last season having a 0.52, making some major progress over number 2. But then you go on to this season where it was his second worst at 0.34, only behind his impossibly bad season in 2020. it's especially bad when you consider the supporting cast there, and also just how much his ice time was diminishing throughout the season. Again, coming in, he was looked at as a core part of the team, somebody that would be a second-line center for them, but he ended up being a fourth-line center and sometimes barely even used. And more bad news started to come at the start of April with the playoffs on the horizon. He started to get healthy scratched in different games, and that's really the nail in the coffin, and showed that he wasn't really going to be a big part of that Canes roster in the playoffs either. And for Kotkaniemi, especially towards the end of the playoffs, he was averaging around 8 to 10 minutes of average time on ice, which, especially considering how many overtimes that team went through, is basically nothing. From Chip Alexander, Don Waddell says one priority will be finding a right shot center. They're looking for better centermen than Kotkaniemi right now. And can you really blame him? I mean, with what Kotkaniemi has shown over the last year, there's a lot of centers out there that are better than him right now. But that's just the thing. If the Canes are going to go for a right shot center and add another center to this group, then there is no way that Jesperi Kotkaniemi, one, plays center, and there's also a chance that he's not even as a fixture in the lineup going forward. You look at Aho, Stahl, Drury, and Kuznetsov. If they were to re-sign Drury and get another centerman, then Kuznetsov might go to the wing or something like that, and Kotkaniemi might be pushed out there too. It would be maybe Stahl as a third line center, Drury as a fourth line center, whatever you want to go for. Carolina would have the options, but I really don't think they'd be looking at Kotkaniemi as a real option, especially if they were to add a fixture second line center onto that group. It would really spread out the lineup, and for Kotkaniemi, I doubt he'd get minutes very often, if at all. I don't think people are realizing that we went from the potential of Kotkaniemi being the top 6 center of the future for Carolina, being a fixture as a second line center at the start of this season, to a guy that might not even be in the lineup for Carolina next year for a lot of games. I don't know how we got here, but it is insane that we have. You got people even talking about Jesperi Kotkaniemi buyout options as well, not just trades, but buying out his contract completely. It was even mentioned by Elliot Friedman on the recent 32 Thoughts as well as a possibility for Carolina. And the fact that it's a possibility now for them just 2 years after signing it, especially for a player that young, that was supposed to be improving every single year, it's been a disaster, man, and a really unfortunate one too. Here's the thing that I think is fascinating for Carolina, especially considering a buyout here, is if they were to go for it, it could make sense for them quite a bit. He, of course, makes $4.8 million in terms of actual cap hit on the books for Carolina for the next few seasons. And considering what Carolina has to do this offseason, there are so many guys they have to re-sign that are more critical of the team than Kotkaniemi is right now. But you look over the next 10 or so seasons and what the cap hit would be if they bought him out, and it would only be around $835K at most. And considering how much the cap is likely to raise over the next just 5 seasons in the NHL, that could be basically nothing. You look at the free agents they have this offseason, there are some critical guys they need to bring back. Seth Jarvis as an RFA, Jake Guentzel as a UFA, but just throughout the lineup, I mean, there's so many guys that you could bring back if you wanted to, like Marty Necas, Teuvo Teravainen, Stefan Nason, and Jordan Martinook, guys, especially in Martinook's and Nason's case, that will want raises potentially. And you also got the defense. I mean, they could end up letting go both Pesce and Shea, but I think they'd want to keep at least one of those guys, and that's going to create some problems too. There are so many different aspects to this Carolina Hurricanes offseason that are going to be absolutely fascinating. But if you want to keep Guentzel, if you want to keep Jarvis, if you want to keep a Pesce or Shea, if you want to keep all these guys, it's going to be pretty hard to fit all of that under the books and also acquire a second line center, also acquire the additions they need to make to simply be a better team. The Canes right now have $27 million in cap space this offseason, but let's say you re-sign Jarvis and Guentzel to long-term deals, that's probably around $15 million there. In terms of the depth deals and players like Martinook, Nason, and Jack Drury, that's probably putting you back at least $5 million combined through all of those guys. And if you want to sign a D like a Shea or a Pesce, that's probably going to be at least around $5-6 million, and that's the cap right there. That's all you have. But if you do buy out Jesperi Kotkaniemi, you'd be saving about $4 million there. And that could go to getting a second line center. That could go to maybe getting a goalie upgrade. Whatever you'd want to do, it would open up flexibility. Right now, Carolina likely won't have that, at least if they're going to re-sign some of their D and re-sign some of that depth. And that's not even talking about Marty Necas, not even talking about Teuvo Teravainen, some of the other D that they could sign for more depth. It is such a cap-strapped offseason for them. I don't think a lot of people realize how much it could be restricted one, but because of Kotkaniemi's deal, it might not seem like too much at 4.8, but it could really restrain them if they want to get upgrades, which Kotkaniemi definitely can't be right now. Here's the thing for Carolina is that obviously a buyout would be a last resort. Obviously, you'd want to see a trade first. You'd be exploring a trade first and foremost, but I don't think there's going to be many teams out there willing to take Kotkaniemi and willing to pay for it. I think teams know the situation that Carolina is in, and I would assume a few rebuilding teams out there might bring on Kotkaniemi, but for a little bit of a pretty penny. I mean, just think about what the Canes did to bring in Patty Marleau from the Leafs and how the Leafs had to give up a first-round pick, which would eventually become Seth Jarvis. I don't think it would have to be on that level, but I don't think it would be too far away. Nobody is going to be in a position where they want to help Carolina, want to help them be a better team. Trading Kotkaniemi right now might be a big thing that propels them into that direction, but I think a lot of teams are going to put a stranglehold on them, as they should. Carolina is in a weird spot here momentum-wise and might have to pay a little bit to get rid of Kotkaniemi in the end. Or they could just buy him out and have about $800K on the books. We'll see what Carolina does here, but they're a team that loves to keep as many picks as possible, and that's what they've done over the past few years. And besides really the Guentzel deal, they've kept their cards pretty close to home, and trading picks just really isn't their forte, but in Kotkaniemi's case, they might be forced to. Two teams I think really make sense to potentially bring on Kotkaniemi and get an extra pick on top, or just sign him once he's bought out. One is the San Jose Sharks. To me, they could use any help possible, but especially considering the timeline for San Jose, Kotkaniemi fits pretty well in that he would help them a little bit while they're still rebuilding and still being this horrible team, but could also maybe elevate his game once he's past that, once better wingers are available around him, and could instantly fit as that second line center there. I also really like the Columbus Blue Jackets as an option, especially if they were going to go for AD with their 4th overall pick in the draft. I think it could really open up some center spots for the future. You could have Fantilli and Sillinger there as the top two, but then have Kotkaniemi kind of filling out that third line center role and being solid depth there while those guys are figuring it out. I think both teams should be considering it, even though the cap hit is pretty large. I think especially in San Jose's case, by the time they're actually good, the cap hit will be raised enough where that contract isn't too much of a nuisance. And I think as a top 3 center core in the future of Celebrini, Smith, and Kotkaniemi, that could be quite decent. We'll see what ends up happening, but I think especially in San Jose's case, they must be considering it, especially if a pick is coming back as well. But man, it just sucks to see, because I know Kotkaniemi is a great kid, man. I mean, just everything that we've seen around him, he just seems like an absolute ball of positivity, but it just feels like the actual productivity, the offensive potential, just hasn't really been able to round out. There's been some great moments defensively and some great hot streaks, but putting it all together just hasn't happened in his career yet. I hope it does, but it doesn't really feel like that's going to be the case in Carolina, at least. With how much they're going to try to upgrade this roster over this offseason, with how much they're going to try to get better, I just don't see Kotkaniemi being a fixture and a part of this future for any longer in Carolina. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope he's able to have a rebounding season, but right now, it ain't looking too good. But I would love to know your thoughts down below on this whole Kotkaniemi situation and what you think the Canes should do. Do you think they should trade him for a pick, try to buy him out and just get rid of that contract as much as possible? And where do you think he goes after this? Do you think he goes to San Jose, Columbus, some other team in a buyout or a trade? And do you still believe in Kotkaniemi's future? Do you still think he can be a great player in this league? Well, I'd love to know all your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you haven't already, and share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Make sure you also click on this card as well for all the hockey prospect content, so much as well for the 2024 draft that you'll want to binge on. And I will see you in the next one. I hope you have a great hockey day, and goodbye.